Today we'll be going over identifying and reporting the spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven with New York iMapInvasives. So a few things before we get started. Everyone is muted. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, you can type them into the chat box. We have somebody from the IMAP team, Fate, who will be monitoring the chat box and answering any questions that come up. We will also have time at the end of the presentation to go over any questions that people may have. Today's presentation is being recorded. After the presentation is finished, you'll receive a link or an email with a link to the recording, as well as any other documents or links that we mentioned during the presentation. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump into it. So my name is Douglas Knopf. I am the Invasive Species Project Specialist with the New York Natural Heritage Program. We're also joined by Tom Allgaier, the Invasive Species Coordinator with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, and Fate Sewanyuan with the iMapInvasives team as well, who's going to be monitoring the chat box. And the way today's presentation is going to be going, we're going to start out with a little bit of introduction and background into IMAP and the SLF mapping that we do. Hand it over to Tom to go over some details about spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven. And then at the end, we'll go back to iMapInvasives to talk about how you can report your findings and participate in our SLF Grid Square program this year. So the New York Natural Heritage Program is our host organization. This is the organization that is tasked with being the record keepers and data collectors for New York State's rare, threatened, and endangered species and ecosystem data. And as one of the greatest threats to rare species is the establishment and spread of invasive species, we also have the Invasive Species Database Program within NYNHP, which is where we come in with the iMapInvasives database, which is the program that the database runs on. This is where we hold all of the information from these professional organizations and community scientists that are documenting their findings. We also offer several other tools like the Watercraft Inspection Program, or WISP program, as well as prioritization tools and data analyses tools to help professionals use the data within the database for prioritization. So like I mentioned, today's webinar is going to be focusing mainly on spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven. So spotted lanternfly is one of our up-and-coming invasive species that is very widespread in its effect of people. It has a lot of public-facing effects. It is a generalist feeder, so it feeds on a lot of different species, especially dangerous to crop species like apple orchards or grape vineyards, as well as ecologically important or rare species, which is why we're concerned about it. Large populations or dense populations can also be very effective to everyday life. They produce sticky honeydew that can cover outdoor surfaces, people's vehicles, like in the bottom right there. This honeydew can also attract sooty mold and stinging insects, so it's a very highly effective species. A lot of people are affected by it, which is why we have such a strong public outreach campaign to get people aware of it. So to help raise awareness and to map the spread and establishment of this species, we have a coordinated statewide effort. This is between the professional organizations like Natural Heritage Program, state parks, ag and markets, DEC, all of the professional players, as well as getting the public involved through volunteer programs, local partnerships for regional invasive species management and their volunteer programs, and basically anybody who is interested in contributing data. We very heavily rely on our community scientists and anybody who's interested to help us fill in any of the data gaps. So just a bit of metrics from the past years. Back in 2024, for our Grid Square program, we had 47 squares claimed. And statewide, for all data coming in, these are the numbers for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven. So as you can see by the map on the left there, for SLF, the main concentration is still remaining in the Hudson Valley and Long Island area, but we're starting to see smaller populations crop up in other places in the state. I also want to take this time to say thank you to all of our volunteers, community scientists who have been contributing data for these species over the years. And I just want to introduce the Grid Square program. We'll be talking a little bit more about this later on after Tom gives his species overviews. But this is our main spotted lanternfly surveying program. So we've overlaid a grid on New York State, breaking it up into 1 kilometer squares, and then gone through and set prioritization for some of these areas. These are areas that have established tree of heaven populations or were marked as high priority by either the PRISM network or by Ag and Markets. So this is a program that's going to be running starting today and running through the end of the year, where you can basically adopt a square and conduct spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven surveys in these areas. Like I said, we'll get into more detail on that later, but this is our main survey program for SLF. And with that, I want to hand it over to Tom Allgaier to talk about the spotted lanternfly and the tree of heaven. Tom?
Good morning. Well, good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. So, all right, I'm going to jump right in. We can go to the next slide. So, New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, or Ag and Markets, is the lead agency for New York State responding to spotted lanternfly. However, we are by far not the only agency. All 9 agencies on the Invasive Species, New York State Invasive Species Council, as all the members of the Invasive Species Advisory Committee and the New York State PRISMs, and many, many others, including iMapInvasives, have all partnered together to try to manage this pest and prevent it from getting here in the first place. We slowed it down. However, it is continuing to spread. But again, we're not doing this alone, but we are the kind of the main point of contact for spotted lanternfly. Next page. So there's a plant hopper native to China and southern parts of Southeast Asia, like Vietnam. It was discovered in Berks County, Pennsylvania in 2014. Since then, it has spread outward into 17 states. I'll get into that a little bit more later. It uses its piercing, sucking mouth parts to feed on over 100 different host plant species. It feeds very much like a straw, not necessarily. It's not sucking the sap out of the plant, but it uses the plant sap pressure to push the sap through the plant. Through the insect. And I'll get into a little bit more of that in the future. Its preferred host is tree of heaven, which is another invasive species. There's another whole segment on that. But the reason why it's such a concern for us with New York State Department of Agriculture and why it ended up in our bucket and not New York State DEC is because it's not primarily a forest pest, although it might have some impacts to the forest. Primarily, it's an agricultural pest to crops like grapes, apples, hops, maples, walnuts, and other plants as well. A lot of small berries are involved. So, next page. Some of the other non-agricultural impacts. So feeding by any insect is going to stress plants, especially when there's massive amounts of insects feeding. It causes a tremendous amount of stress, and it can transmit disease, not to humans, but it can transmit plant diseases from plant to plant. And the stressed plants are more susceptible to other insects attacking them, and also viral and fungal pathogens as well. It excretes a sticky, sugary substance, the honeydew that Doug mentioned, which is mostly the tree sap, but it's also their excrement. And that rains down during the day, and when they're feeding, it could be a bright sunny day, and you think it's raining out, but that's just honeydew. Anyone that's familiar with growing roses and has had aphids, it feeds very much the same way. Aphids also produce honeydew, and you're also probably familiar with black sooty mold, which grows on everything below it that the honeydew grows on, covers. The black sooty mold will grow on that honeydew. So it impacts the quality of life. It's really a nuisance pest in urban and suburban areas. It kind of makes you not want to go outside and do things if your deck and your patio and the car and everything else is covered in this black sooty sticky mess. You can see in the top left photo there, the bottom step has been power washed. You can see how slick looking and slippery and wet the other steps are from the honeydew and the black sooty mold. So besides that, it prohibits the plant from photosynthesizing properly. Also, it'll start to ferment. That sticky substance will start to ferment. And you can see on the top right, there's many adult spotted lanternflies, but that frothy substance is fungal growths growing from, it's actually the honeydew is starting to ferment. It gives off like a slight alcohol, sweet smell, which also attracts stinging insects, especially later in the year. So, next page. So again, the agricultural impacts, vineyard losses. Nationally, New York ranks third in grape production, second in apple production. We've been promoting our orchard, our hops orchards, our hops yards, especially for locally produced beers and things like that. And we're not sure what the environmental impacts are going to be to forests, mostly for forestry regeneration. It does not kill mature trees, but it can harm some very young saplings, especially when it comes to things like walnuts and maples. A lot of things feed on grapes, but not very many things will kill grapes. So this insect will actually kill, especially depending on the variety. Some are more susceptible. This can actually kill grapevines. And so it just not only has an impact to the fruit production, but to the plant itself. And it takes about 7 to 8 years from planting a grape crop to harvesting. So there's a very much, many years of lag time to produce a crop. So it's a great impact. It's not just a seasonal thing. It could be very detrimental to vineyards. So next page. So where is it currently? As mentioned, it's in 17 states. You can see it's kind of spattering here and there to the west and south and north, and it's spreading further to the east. That may or may not be to, the prevailing wind travels from west to east, but there's also a greater population of humans, so it's being helped accidentally and being moved around all throughout the Northeast. You can see there about a third in New York State. Thank you. Good, perfect. You can see there about a third in New York State is colored blue. However, just because your county or the neighboring county is colored blue doesn't mean the entire county is covered from head to toe in spotted lanternfly. There may be just 1 or 2 populations within the county, but that county has had a positive population detection. It was first detected in Richmond County, which is Staten Island, New York, part of New York City, in 2020, and it is now currently confirmed in 27 New York counties that we know of as of now. By the end of the year, that's likely to change. Not that we want it to, but it just every year we've been adding a few counties, and it seems to be increasing. So next page. So the life cycle, it overwinters as the egg stage. Well, we'll start there. You're not likely to find eggs this time of year unless they're old eggs that have already hatched. A portion of the eggs are covered with this almost like a putty substance. It can be white and glossy initially and then dries up and cracks, looks more like mud, and it will vary in color from white to tan to brown as it ages. About 70% of the egg masses are covered. The other percentage are not. The uncovered eggs look like caraway seeds glued to a tree. There'll be 40 to 70 eggs in each egg mass, and each female can lay multiple egg masses. When they hatch out, this time, well, a little bit earlier than this, April into May, with the cool temperatures we're having, you might still see some hatch this time of year, but not likely. The nymphs emerge. They're glossy black with white dots. They're very tiny, like ticks. They'll molt 3 times and still look basically the same, just larger. The 4th time they molt, they get these red wing pads. They're about the size of a dime at that point. That's when most people usually notice them in the environment. They're much easier to spot. And then later in the summer, going into July, they'll molt 1 more time and emerge as adults. And they will feed and cause damage during both the nymph stage and the adult stage. And the feeding mechanism and damage is identical, whether it's an adult or a nymph. So they have a pretty wide range of time where they will do feeding damage. They're also good at hitchhiking at all life stages, including the egg masses. So, next page. So right now we're kind of in this window of, all the eggs should have hatched, although we might have some microclimates that have smaller colder pockets and things like that. The nymphs are very active throughout the state. We haven't had any reports of adults yet, but later next month we should start to see adults. Next page. As I mentioned, they're very, very tiny. You can see the photo in the center there. They're all clustered around that egg mass, and they've just hatched out. They're just starting to get their color. The rare photo there on the left was taken when they immediately hatched, and they're white only for a few minutes before their exoskeleton hardens off, and they turn that black glossy color with the white dots. So that was like immediately after they've hatched. They have that white stage, but just really just a few minutes. Once the exoskeleton hardens off, they have that black exoskeleton. And again, they go through 5 instars as nymphs. They molt one more time into an adult. And this is kind of the stage we're at now, probably into the second molt the second instar nymphs is probably what you'll be seeing now throughout the state. Next page. Again, very tiny, tick-like. You can hear see some here on the wall and on a chair. Really tiny little dots, like the dot on a page. But as they mature and they molt, they get a little bit bigger. That's probably a 3rd instar nymph there on the right, on some outdoor patio furniture. At that point, they're a little bit easier to spot in the environment. When they do first emerge, they're very generalist feeders, and they will feed on anything their teeny tiny mouth parts can get their mouths into. As they become more mature, they get more selective in what they want to feed on. So like if you had a tree of heaven or a lanthus tree and also a black walnut, you're actually more likely to find it on the black walnut when they're in the younger nymph stages than tree of heaven. For whatever reason, they're attracted to those. But as they mature, they'll migrate more towards the tree of heaven. So, next page. Second instar nymphs. Again, they're getting a little bit bigger. They start to congregate more because when they first disperse, one of their methods of dispersing themselves is the little teeny tiny ones will curl up tall structures and launch themselves into the air to disperse themselves in the environment, so they're not competing for the same resources. But as they mature, they'll congregate together, as you can see on this branch on the right. They are kind of hard to spot sometimes. They're relatively small and they're dark colored, so they blend in pretty well. Next page. Again, here you can see some of them congregating. On the left is on Tree of Heaven, a very tender new growth, but again, as they mature, they go towards more of the thicker bark, and they can get their mouth parts through those thicker materials on the plants. So, next page. Here's one molting from a 3rd into a 4th instar, so you can see it's starting to redden up. Again, that photo was taken on the left there, right as it was hardening off and had just molted that last nymph stage. And you can see the size of the nymphs compared to the adult. The adults are about not quite 3/4 of an inch to an inch in length, and the red instar, the 4th instars there, are about the size of a dime. So, next page. So often you'll see these, and you can see how they're hunched back on their back legs. They are plant hoppers, so they're constantly on alert, and when they're threatened, they use their back legs like springs, and they hop. The adults will do the same. The adults can fly, but they will hop at the first chance they get, first indication that there's a threat, they will hop. So, excuse me. Next page. Again, more of the same. They're a little bit easier to spot in the environment at this stage. Next page. And you can see here again, the 3rd and 4th instars are kind of mixed together on that branch. well, you're more likely to find the third instars feeding on tender growth, like in the left photo, as the thicker bark on the right. Next page. When you find the adults, you've seen probably some outreach material with them spread open, looking like a butterfly, and a very beautiful insect. I think they're a very beautiful insect in all their life stages, except maybe the eggs. But you're not often going to see them with their wings spread. This is more likely how you'll see the adults, hunched back on their back legs. The semi-translucent wings are kind of pinkish because of the red hind wings are kind of showing through. Very distinctive. There's not many things that look like the adults. There are some lookalikes for the nymphs, but not really for the adults. There's very few that look like this, so they're easy to spot. Next page. Again, I mentioned that they're pretty easily, they hitchhike pretty easily. Here's one on a vehicle with the window rolled down. You can see how the adult could just, fly in or crawl in or hop in to that window and not intentionally moving it, but people can actually move them around. Service vehicles and landscape crews and things like that. Even just, people parking with their windows down and then moving a car can easily transport these. So that's one simple thing you could do to help prevent accidental movement. And as pretty as the adults are, they can be pretty well camouflaged. You can see here with the lichens on the bark in the background, and they blend in pretty easily when their wings are folded. So, next page. The adult females, when they're ready to lay eggs, it's called gravid. So it's basically like a pregnant insect. Their abdomen starts to swell, and you see these yellow pleats. You only see this on the females when they're ready to lay. The photo on the left isn't the best photo, but it was the best time to catch that insect because looking at the pleats, they're completely flattened out, and she is ready to lay eggs. She's probably about as full as eggs as she's ever going to be. So that was the perfect time to catch her and remove her from the environment. The one on the right, you can see the pleats are folded in together, kind of folded over each other a little bit. So when you do see the adults, especially later in the season, you'll see these yellow pleats. Those are the females, not the males. And also the photo on the right down the center there, touching kind of into the abdomen area, you can see that piercing, sucking mouth part. The stylus is very much like a straw or a needle. So. Next page. Here's a tree of heaven or an ailanthus tree. It has that cantaloupe kind of bark, and the egg masses blend in really well. They're super well camouflaged. I don't know if you can see the egg mass there in the center, but it blends in very well with that stippling on the bark of the tree of heaven. If you click one more time, it should highlight it. There it is in the center. And then we can go to the next slide. They like to hide their eggs. They prefer protected areas underneath of things, tucked in little pockets like this, like there was some cat facing or some damage on the tree that kind of grew over. On the outside, you give it a kind of a cursory inspection, and you don't see any egg masses. You think you're good, but if you look underneath that bark that's kind of peeled back a little bit, there was a female in there laying eggs, and she had just laid those eggs. She was still in the cavity when the photo was taken by some of our colleagues at the USDA. So they're kind of tricky like that, and they like to hide their eggs in protected areas. So think underneath things. I mean, they will lay their eggs on any outdoor surface. Anything that's not moving outside is fair game. So if grandma's sitting out there for too long, be careful. But metal, rusty metal in particular, objects that can be moved readily, those are the things that are more important to us as far as surveying for egg masses, because those items can be moved and introduce a new population to a new area. So, next page. Again, the egg masses, you can see her there. I guess she was interrupted laying some uncovered eggs there, but it's not a complete egg mass, but you can have an idea of the size. She's about an inch. The egg masses are about the same. Again, with that cantaloupe type bark on the tree of heaven, it blends right in, and that's a little difficult to spot. The uncovered eggs are a little bit easier. They're not as well camouflaged, but even the adult female blends in really well with that bark pattern. So, next page. Again, rusty metal. This tire and rim were laying on the ground. There was really nothing visible. But when you flip it over, there's multiple egg masses under there. Rusty metal, protected area, perfect spot to find egg masses. And I mentioned earlier about some of the egg masses are covered, some are not. And on the left side, on the bottom, you can see that some of those have a little hole, a little slit in them. Those eggs have already hatched. So these two egg masses are actively hatching out because they're not all hatched out, but there's a few in each one. So that's an active egg site. The ones on the right were probably freshly laid. They're still zipped together. And then you can see the contrast between what looks like sap, which is actually the covering on the egg masses, versus the uncovered next to each other. So there is variability in texture and color on the egg mass covering. So, next page. Again, on this metal barrel here, you can see the ribs on the metal barrel. It's hard to see the top rib there, but that whole top rib has egg masses underneath of it. And when that space was taken up, they moved down below. When that space was taken up, they started laying on the side of the barrel. You're likely to find more than one egg mass, not just because the female lays an egg mass and then moves a little bit and lays another egg mass, but they're attracted to lay their egg masses together in groups. So once one lays an egg mass, the others are attracted to that spot to lay additional egg masses. Here you can see the lenticels on what I'm assuming is probably a cherry, but it's hard to tell. But the lenticels on the tree and the egg masses kind of blend in together. And again, it's just like a little smear of mud when you're surveying, so it's difficult to spot sometimes. So, next page. Underneath the things, I mentioned rusty metal. Obviously, the railroad tracks aren't going anywhere, but you can park a rail car on there, and those eggs can hatch off and climb onto the rail car and be transported down the road, just like the truck. There's a tractor trailer here. You look, on the sides and the top, you don't see anything, but underneath that taillight housing is just covered in egg masses, but the top side is empty. Again, protected areas, undersides of things, rusty metal. The same goes for the camp chair, which is laying on the ground. Somebody could easily just pick that up, especially if it's dark out or something. You pick it up, you move it to a new campsite, you go to to a festival or a car race or some other event. You take it up to the hunting cabin or fishing cabin and leave it behind, and you easily move an egg mass to a new area. So, next page. So the adults, again, very beautiful, but you're not likely to see them in this shape. Currently, we're not quite looking for adults yet, but soon. We're looking for the nymphs at this point with the black spots. They'll start turning red probably the end of this month, and then we'll start seeing adults next month. Flat protected areas underneath and behind. That's the places to look for egg masses, especially if there's rusty metal present. And don't get discouraged if you're surveying for these and you don't see anything. So you claim a grid, you go out there, you survey, and you don't find anything. That's great news. That's so negative is good. Negative survey, you didn't find anything, but you looked. And it's important to add that information into IMAP and not just be like, oh, there was nothing there, I'm not going to report it. Reporting that negative data really helps us know that, okay, this area has been searched and nothing was found. So we don't direct people to that area to search it again. We can direct those resources to places that have not been searched. And it helps us monitor its spread throughout the state, and we can react quicker and better. So negative is good. So that's my take-home messages for spotted lanternfly. Next. So the primary host, not the only host, as I mentioned, there's 100 species, is tree of heaven, or Lanthus altissima. It's another invasive species, very tropical-looking tree. It was brought to this continent in 1848 as an ornamental. It provided a lot of shade. It was very fast-growing. It started being planted in Pennsylvania and moved rapidly west from there. It was also thought to be a host for silk moth, and they were thinking they could produce a silk crop from it. That didn't quite work out, and now we're stuck with these unfortunate invasives. if you've ever read the book or heard of the book, Tree Grows in Heaven, that tree was also, in the novel, was a tree of heaven, or a lanthus. It grows in cracks and crevices, very urban areas, disturbed soils, so not a surprise that it would be found in a very urban area like New York City. So, next page. So its native range is China and Taiwan, very similar range to spotted lanternfly, so there's a lot of overlap there. It tolerates very poor soils. It grows well in urban areas, many habitat types, just needs a little bit of open light, and it'll grow aggressively, very, very aggressively. It'll grow up through concrete, through asphalt. They're very drought tolerant. It crowds out native species like most invasives, and they produce dense colonies and really shades out everything else. They also release allelopathic compounds that prevent other seeds from germinating. It can change the nutrient soil cycling, and it can also damage buildings with its roots. As I mentioned, it can go up through concrete, so it can damage foundations. It can damage other infrastructure like underground pipes and underground utilities. But it's the preferred host for spotted lanternfly, but unfortunately it's not the only host. Spotted lanternfly can complete its life cycle on other plants such as maples and walnuts and things like that. So, but it prefers tree of heaven. They can grow quite large, 80 feet and sometimes more. They often grow in clumps or colonies. They're all grafted together by their roots underground. And the common name comes from towards heaven because it grows very, very quickly towards heaven. Yeah, so you'll start to see them, the smaller ones are a little more easy to identify than the adults, especially when there's no leaves on them. But they're often dense colonies when they're well established. Next page. Interesting about the leaves is they have compound pinnate leaves. So they have leaflets that come off of a central stem or a petiole. The petiole is attached to the stem of the plant. Each leaflet will have a little notch or a little thumb that comes off at the base, which helps you identify this versus sumac, which is also a host, or walnut, which is another host. They also have compound pinnate leaves, but none of them will have this little thumb at the base of the leaf, a little notch. So it's just another way of identifying them. And tree of heaven is alternate versus opposite. So the leaves will come off in alternating left and right sides of the stem versus directly across from each other. So it's another way to identify the plant, the host plant versus some of the other plants in the environment. Next page. Here's a good example of the compound pinnate leaves. You can see there's multiple leaflets per stem. So, next page. And again, here's a good close-up, a couple close-ups of that notch. There's also a very tiny gland, a little round dot you could see at the tip of that notch, which is much harder to see, but there is a gland, just a really small bump at the tip of that gland at the base of the leaflet. So, next page. The leaf clusters, they'll change in color as the season goes on. They'll emerge as green, very similar to ash, sometimes similar to maple. However, maple trees have the samaras that come off with, they're kind of opposite each other, and people are familiar with the little helicopters that they've probably played with as children, where the seed is at one end. The seed for the tree of heaven is kind of more towards the center, and it's more an oblong shape, and they'll form dense clusters of seeds. They'll start off as green. As the season goes on, by the end of the summer, they're turning reddish orange, and they'll persist over the winter. And like in the top photo there'll be clusters of these brown seeds on the female trees. There are female and male trees. So if you don't see the seeds, doesn't necessarily mean it's not a tree of heaven. It could just be you're looking at a male tree if there's no presence of seed. So next page. The twigs have pith, which is kind of a hollowish center. And it's I've never burnt peanut butter, but it's supposed to smell like burnt peanut butter. It has a very unpleasant smell, I can tell you that. But if you break off the twig and there's pith, It could be a sumac, it could be a tree of heaven. It's definitely not going to be a walnut, but it has that soft, hollow center to the stems. And if it does have that hollow center, it smells bad, it's tree of heaven. So, next page. I mentioned the bark earlier. It starts off pretty smooth, cantaloupe-like, but as they mature, they do get a little bit blocky. Sometimes it could look like a younger red maple. The bark is a little bit similar, but it looks almost just really like cantaloupe skin when they're younger. But when they start getting older and more diameter, like 8-10 inches in diameter, they get a little bit more blocky bark to them. So next page. Little comparison there with tree of heaven, sumac, horse chestnut, and walnut twigs. The horse chestnut has a great big bud at the end of the twig. The walnut and tree of heaven are very similar. Again, if you snap them, one will have pith, one won't. But the tree of heaven has this really big horseshoe-shaped leaf bud scar and a fairly substantial leaf bud, where the black walnuts will have a very small leaf scar. Sumac, again, very small leaf scars, and you won't have the leaf bud as dominant on the sumac. But the sumac will have hollow pith. So, next page. You can see the tree of heaven and the sumac leaves next, compound pinnate leaves next to each other. Very similar, but the sumac will not have the little notch at the end of the leaf there. So the sumac has clusters of red seeds. Staghorn sumac looks like a stag's horn. On the right side, you can see the lower growing shrub of the sumac with the much broader, less dense canopy of the tree of heaven in the background. So, next page. Again, walnut, another host. One telltale sign is the fruits. So the fruits, when they first emerge, will have this mesocarp, this yellowish green outer covering, which you probably don't want to pick up and touch because it will stain your hands brown for many, many days. The walnuts have almost like a brain pattern. They're not going to look like the English walnuts you buy in the store, but the black walnuts will have this more groove pattern to the nuts. Tree of heaven won't produce those, so if you find these nuts below the tree, it might be a good hint that it is walnut, not tree of heaven. And again, the alternate versus opposite leaflet pattern, and then the thumb at the bottom of the leaf is another indication. And the walnuts have a much smaller bud scar from where the leaf fell off, and the small bud above it where the tree of heaven has a much larger bud scar, very horseshoe shape. So, next page. Ash is another plant with a compound leaf, but the ash trees will have a much shorter and much more open leaflet. So the spacing between the leaflets on the stem is much broader. It's less uniform, where the tree of heaven has many more leaflets per compound leaf. And also the seeds are a little bit different. I think that's the next slide. Yep. So here you can see the difference in the leaflets. So the samaras. So the ash will have the seed at one end, but it'll be relatively oblong and straight, where the seed for the tree of heaven will be centered and has a little bit more of a point to it. But when they're hanging in clusters up in the tree, it can be a little bit difficult to identify that. So, but they do look very similar seed clusters. So, but the individual seeds are very distinguishable. Next page. So my take-home messages for tree of heaven is check your plants. It might be tree of heaven, it might not be tree of heaven, but it could still be a host for spotted lanternfly. You're more likely to find them, especially as later stage nymphs and adults, on tree of heaven, but they can be on many other plants. So don't be discouraged if you claim a grid and it doesn't have any tree of heaven. If it's got maple, if it's got walnut, if it's got wild grape, if it's got many other plants, it's still a good site to survey because they could still be there. But if you do have tree of heaven, they're more likely, especially later on in their life stages, to be found on tree of heaven or near tree of heaven than they are on the other plants. So I think there's one slide. Yep. So as far as reporting, iMapInvasives is a great place. But if you need more information, the New York State Department of Agriculture homepage has a page specifically for spotted lanternfly. There's some basic information there, but also New York State, the New York State Land Grant College, which is Cornell University, has set up their branch of integrated pest management, has set up a page for spotted lanternfly, and a wealth of information that's constantly updated is available at their site, including management options, identification, alternate plants to host, alternate plants to plant. But the most important thing is the management options and also the updated map, the maps I showed earlier. Those are housed there as well. So, a week from now, 2 months from now, if you want to know where it's at currently, you can refer back to that site, and the absolute, up-to-date map will be there per county. It might not show your neighborhood, but will show the county level. Again, you could search iMapInvasives. There's a lot of data there as well. That gets a little bit more granular, so you can find it more in your neighborhood versus the county. So just additional information, and I'm always a resource that I can be reached at through my email. Don't necessarily need folks reporting that they found spotted lanternfly to me, but that's why we have the reporting tools. So thanks. Pass it back to Doug.
Great, thanks, Tom. A lot of really good information on our focal species. And now that we have heard a bit about the threat that these species pose and how to identify them out in the wild, we'll finish off today's webinar with how you can report them to iMapInvasives and how you can get involved in our Grid Square program. So just another quick overview of how iMapInvasives operates. We are the centralized invasive species database, so we're utilized by all of the professional organizations like Ag and Markets, DEC, and the PRISMs to hold all of their data for the invasive species surveys and management work that they're doing. But we also rely very heavily on community science data to fill in the gaps left by professionals, as they're not able to get to all areas in the state. Besides just holding all the data, we also provide a lot of additional services through data analyses. We have distribution maps, automatic generated reports. We have early detection emails that can go out if you have a specific species or area of interest that you want to know when new data is coming in for it. We have web map services to allow our partners to have live views of the iMapInvasives database on their websites. And we also have multiple different types of data, so you can track things like control efforts and management for different species as well. There's several main types of data that are available to record in iMapInvasives. So like Tom was mentioning before, there's present and not detected data. If you go out and you find a species, you're looking for spotted lanternfly and you find one, you would report it as a presence, the actual species. And you can do that by reporting the location for it and some extra information. There'll be several other data fields that you can fill out. This can be reported as points, lines, or polygons, depending on what data collection tool you're using. There's also not detected data. If you go out specifically looking for spotted lanternfly and you don't find any, again, like Tom mentioned, it's very important to have a record that you went out and looked in an area instead of just having a gap in the map where there's no data. So if you go out and you look and you don't find anything, a not detected data point is really important. Also recording how long that you spent surveying for a certain species. We'll touch more on that in a little bit here. iMapInvasives database also has treatment data, like I mentioned. If you are actively managing for an invasive species, doing something like mechanical, chemical, or biological control for the species, you can report data for that. To see, change over time and to see if your management strategies are effective. iMapInvasives also offers several different tools that allow you to input data into our database. The little smartphone thing here is our our mobile app, which is one of our simpler tools to input data into the database. It's as easy as downloading the app, logging in, going out and finding a species, taking a picture, saying what species it is, and whether it's detected or not detected, and that will send data directly into the database. The map on the lower right there is the browser version of the iMapInvasives database. So if you log into your account on your home computer or your web browser on your phone, this is what you'll see. And there's also a button on here that you can create records and put them into the database directly. Whenever you are inputting data into the iMapInvasives database, it will initially come in as unconfirmed, and it'll show up as a little pink dot on the map here. And it will remain that way until it has been reviewed by somebody in our expert confirming network. So that could be somebody on the IMAP team, somebody from DEC, someone like Tom in Ag and Markets. They'll look at your report, they'll look at the species you said it was and the photo you submitted with it. And if everything checks out and looks correct, it will be confirmed, and it will then show up as a green dot, and anyone can see it in the database. There are certain instances where it doesn't exactly work like this. Spotted lanternfly is one of these instances. So for this species, it will be not available to see until it has been confirmed. And that's just so that we can make sure that somebody in the expert network can take a look at the reports that are coming in and verify it before it'll show up. So just to kind of visualize how that looks, over on the left side, when a report first comes into IMAP, comes in as unconfirmed. For a ordinary species that's very common or not a high priority, something like tree of heaven, it comes in as unconfirmed, and as long as you're logged in, you can see those unconfirmed points. Email alert can go out to anybody who is a confirmer. They can take a look at those unconfirmed records, and as long as they check out and everything looks correct, they can be confirmed. And then they'll show up as a green dot in the public map, which is accessible to everybody, regardless if you are logged into an account or not. For species like spotted lanternfly, this will come in as unconfirmed and be confidential until confirmed, so only a select number of individuals with certain permissions will be able to get those email alerts, review the records, confirm them, and then those will also show up on the public map. Once they're confirmed and on that public map, any user who has email alerts set up for a specific area or species will be able to get alerts for it. So you can set up an alert for your local park for spotted lanternfly, and once they're confirmed, they'll show up on those email alerts. So like I mentioned, despite all of the professionals going out and coordinating on this project, we still have gaps. Individuals like me and Tom are in the office a lot, so we don't have time to go out and survey all of New York to look for spotted lanternfly, which is why we rely heavily on our community science efforts. And so our SLF Grid Square program is designed to kind of have more boots on the ground and more eyes looking out in areas that we have priority for and looking for spotted lanternfly. So the way that the Grid Square program works, we break it up into a few steps: setting up an IMAP account, selecting an area that you want to survey, preparing for your survey, and then actually going out and conducting these surveys. And conducting one survey through each survey season. And when we say survey season, what we mean by that is the basically the different life stages of the spotted lanternfly. So right now through the end of the month, like Tom mentioned, there may be some tail end of some egg masses at certain places in the States or certain microclimates, but for the most part, you'll be seeing the early instars. Then in the summer season, July through the end of August, you'll see all of the 5 instars of nymphs, and you'll start to see adults emerge. And then towards the end of the year in the fall, September through mid-November, you'll see the adults as well as when they start laying eggs. So those are what we consider our 3 survey seasons. And it is best to go into, if you adopt a grid square, going into them during each of these 3 seasons to conduct surveys. So going through all 4 of those steps, starting with setting up an iMapInvasives account. You can do this by going to nyimapinvasives.org and hitting the login button on the upper right. I also want to bring attention to this yellow banner kind of in the center of the page there that'll be visible on any page you are on our website. That'll bring you directly to our spotted lanternfly page where pretty much all of this information that we're going over today will also be available. But if you want to create an account, going to that login button will bring you to this page here. If you already have an account, you can log in at the top of the page. If you haven't logged in a while, there's a forget password function to help you recover your account. But if you're creating a new account, it's free, easy to do. You just need your name, email, password, and your jurisdiction, which is the state you're operating in. So you choose New York for this. After you hit join, you'll get sent an email to your selected email account with our user agreement. You accept the terms of the agreement, and then your account will be active. If anybody has difficulty with this point, you can reach out to us directly. That user agreement email is good for a week. So if you are creating an account, make sure you're on the lookout for that right away to accept that before the link expires. If anyone has issues with that, you can reach out to us and we'll help you out creating an account. And once your account is active, you log into your account, and this is what you see. This is the iMapInvasives database as seen through the web browser. So from here, you can look at all of the data within the iMapInvasives database if you want to look at your area or certain species or anything like that. If you're just interested in the grid square program, the one thing that we suggest you do before moving on to selecting a square is going to your account information and writing down your person number. This is the number, the unique number that's associated with your account, and you will need this number for signing up for a grid square. So go into your account settings there and write down that number, keep it on a piece of paper or written down on your phone so that you have it handy before moving on. Once your account is all set up and you're able to log in and get that number, next thing you want to do is select your grid square. So this is separate from the iMapInvasives database or our website. It's on our website at nyimapinvasives.org/SLF. Like I mentioned before, that orange banner that's at the top of our website right now will bring you to that page directly. And this is where you can sign up for your grid square. So the way these works, we overlay the grid over New York State, where each square is 1 square kilometer. We went through and identified priority areas with our partners. So squares that show up as red are focal areas that we are really interested in having surveys conducted at. And then there is yellow squares that were recommended by the partnerships for regional invasive species management as being priority areas. Purple squares overlay where we have tree of heaven data. So there's habitat that already exists that might be suitable for spotted lanternfly to survive on. And then blue squares are publicly accessible lands that can also be surveyed. And if you go to the grid square sign-up sheet and you're looking for a specific area, but there aren't any squares on that area, but you still want to conduct surveys there, you are absolutely welcome to do so. And we encourage you to still conduct surveys. It just won't be as a formal part of the grid square program. Like we keep mentioning, any data that is coming in any part of the state is still good, whether or not there is pre-established priority set on the area. So if you don't have a square in your local park, but you really want to conduct surveys there, we still encourage you to do so. So after your account is set up and you've signed up for your square, the next step is to prepare for surveying. So this is basically planning how you want to record your findings into IMAP. So on this table on the left here, we have several options for recording. The IMAP Online, like I mentioned, you can, on your home computer, log into your account on the dashboard or onto the database and input records directly that way. And then these two options on the right are mobile data collection tools. So things that you can download onto your smartphone or tablet and take out into the field with you to record data while you're actually on site. So I'll be going over real quick how to utilize the iMapInvasives mobile app to record data. Again, this is our most beginner-friendly and easiest to use reporting tool for this. The mobile app allows you to take single point data for a location. Things like the Survey 123 form will allow for more complex data, things like points, lines, or polygons, as well as multiple species to a single feature. But for the mobile app, it's real simple: 1 report, 1 point, and 1 species, and then it gets submitted into the database. So this app is available on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. Just look up iMapInvasives and you'll be able to download it. Setting up the app is very straightforward as well. Once you download it from the store and have it on your device, you'll set it up by logging in using your IMAP credentials. So those same username and password that you made your account with on the computer, you'll input here. Hitting the retrieve IMAP list is basically the login button, but instead of being like a live login that requires internet connectivity, it's more of a snapshot. So you'll retrieve IMAP lists while you have Wi-Fi on your device. It will sync everything up, and then you can take that device out into the field where you don't have Wi-Fi, or you don't even need to have cell service, but you can still record invasive species, and it will be stored on your device. So again, adding observations, taking a picture of the species you find, choosing which species it is, saying whether or not it's detected or not detected, and then that is it for data collecting. And you can take as many of these as you want. They'll all be stored on your device until you get to step 3, where you're back home, you have Wi-Fi or good service, and then you can upload all of those records from your phone into the iMapInvasives database. And like I mentioned before, photos are really one of the most essential parts of collecting data. So all these records that you're collecting are coming into the IMAP database as unconfirmed, and then an expert is going to be looking at them to check the photo, check what species you said it was, and then confirm it so it shows up publicly in the database. So you have to ensure that there's a clear, distinct photo. So these two photos on the left here, the one on the far left is too blurry to really tell what species it is. And the one on the right there is a little too zoomed out to really see any defining characteristics that would be able to let us know what species of tree it is. So you really want to have a focused, clear photo of what you're documenting. So here is a twig of a tree of heaven, and you can clearly see the shape and size of the leaf scars there that will let you know that it is a tree of heaven. If you're trying to focus on like a small twig like that and you're having a hard time getting it focused, sometimes doing something like, putting your hand behind it or something like that can help to focus. And making sure, again, to highlight any of those distinct defining characteristics. It's always better to have a close-up photo of, a unique characteristic rather than a zoomed out photo of the entire population or a tree. If you're looking for any more information on how you can report to iMapInvasives, you can go to nyimappinvasives.org/report. It's also one of the main buttons on our website. Report an invasive will bring you to this page as well. And this can give you more information about the different tools that I highlighted here, as well as some other reporting options. So now that your account is set up, you have your grid square selected, and you know what tool you're going to be using. The last step is to go out and conduct your surveys at your square. So you'll want to identify between 1 or 3 spots within the grid square that you've selected where you want to conduct these surveys, ensuring that these locations are safe to access and are fully publicly accessible. So you're not going onto any private property or anything like that. And also remaining within your comfort level for surveying. So you don't have to go wander off into the middle of the woods to make sure that these spots are evenly distributed. You can do so right on trail or in an easily accessible spot. When you're at your survey spot, surveying for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven, again, depending on what time of year it is, looking for the SLF nymphs versus adults versus eggs, and looking on the acceptable places where you might find each of these. Tree of heaven is also commonly found in disturbed areas, so these are common near things like parking lots, rail lines, or other areas that have been heavily disturbed in the past. And then reporting what you find to iMapInvasives. So if you have found one of the invasive species, making a presence record and taking a photo of it. If you are looking for the species and you don't find them, marking it as a not detected record, and specifying how long you spent surveying for each species. This is helpful for us to know, if you've spent 1 minute versus a half hour, just knowing how thoroughly an area was surveyed. But we usually recommend between 3 and 10 minutes for each site, just to make sure that they can be fully checked for each species. If you sign up for a grid square now, and then you don't end up going out until August to survey, and you've forgotten where your square is, there's also a box within the sign up grid square sign up sheet right at the top there, the Find My Grid Square, where you can input your person ID number that I mentioned before. You can put that in there and it will bring you to your grid squares so that you can help plan out where you're going to be conducting your surveys. And again, just do your best. You don't have to put yourself in any extreme situations. You know, if your grid square looks like this one in the center here, we won't ask you to swim to the other side of the river to get that little point of land over there. Just conducting surveys where you're able to, where you're comfortable with, and where you are allowed access, and just doing your best. And again, specifying logging into your account and going into the database is separate than the Grid Square sign-up sheet here, which is on the iMapInvasives website. So they're in two separate locations. I'll be sure to send out links for both of those locations in the follow-up email, so you'll have easy reference for both of them. And then again, just another overview of the three survey seasons. We ask that you get out as often as you can, you know, 2 or 3 times a year. If you're able to do all 3 seasons, that's great. But again, do your best, conduct as many surveys as you are realistically able to do. And all data that comes in is good data. So we appreciate any efforts that anyone is able and willing to make. This is just an overview of what nyimappinvasives.org/SLF looks like. So it will have all of the resources that we have gone over during today's webinar available on this page here. So there'll be resources for how to use IMAP, how to get into your account, how to sign up for Grid Square with a direct link to the sign up, the dates for the survey seasons, as well as additional resources for identifying SLF and Tree of Heaven. There will also be a direct link to this webinar's recording on this page once it's available on our YouTube channel, if you want to reference back to anything that we've gone over during the webinar today. So all that information will be readily available on our website throughout the remainder of the Grid Square program season. If at any point you are stuck or you're looking for certain things that you're not able to find, you can always reach out to us directly. iMapInvasives@dec.ny.gov. You can shoot us an email with any questions you have, and we can help you get started. We'll also be sending out periodic reminder emails, usually probably once each survey season. Once we get towards the end of it, or we are starting a new survey season, we'll send out reminders to check out your grid squares and conduct surveys. I also mentioned the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management a few times for the PRISMs. So the PRISMs are kind of our boots on the ground counterpart. iMapInvasives acts as the database, and the PRISMs act as the agencies that are going out and conducting a lot of these surveys and management for invasive species around New York State. They also have very involved community science programs and volunteer programs. So if anybody is looking for more opportunities to get involved in your local area, dealing with invasive species, reaching out and coordinating with your local PRISM is a great place to start. I know a lot of the PRISMs have other webinars scheduled for this week during NYSAW, but most PRISMs will have programs going on throughout the summer. So feel free to look at the website of your local PRISM and see if they have any upcoming events if you want to get more involved in your local area. And just one final take-home message from the team. Negative surveys are always good if you're going out and looking for things and you don't find them. Still taking data for that is always great. Making sure that you know where you want to survey within your grid square before heading out into the field, making sure that they are safe and publicly accessible areas. You're able to submit fake species for testing records on any of our data collection tools, so you can ensure you know the process and they're working correctly before you go out into the field. So if you download the mobile app and you want to test it out, make sure it works and you know how to use it, you can submit fake species records. You can do that as many times as you want. And if you made it this far through the entire webinar, then you are probably ready to go out and conduct invasive species surveys. And with that, that brings us to the end of the training. I want to say thank you very much to everyone for attending. Thank you again to Tom for giving us the overview of Tree of Heaven and Spotted Lanternfly. And we want to wish everyone a happy New York's Invasive Species Awareness Week. And we'll be looking forward to your data coming in the future. And with that, I'm going to